amazing Power to Fly chat and learn. And I'm really excited to dig in and jump in with our speaker today. But before we do, I just want to go over some real quick housekeeping items for y'all. So biggest thing to know here is participation. All right. We want to encourage you, because these events are all about you. It's about our attendees, our community members, and getting you all the information and the resources you want. So, oops, so sorry, y'all. Gotta move my stuff out. What I want to do or want to flag for y'all is that there's a bunch of different ways you can participate. Okay. You can turn your cameras on if you want to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. Do not stress about being insta perfect. I think this is probably my first hair wash in like 5 days. So, do not stand on ceremony, y'all. We don't need makeup. You don't need a fancy hairstyle. You do not need a killer office. Bring it. Are you working from your couch? Are you in, on an ironing board in your living room? Are you hanging out with your dog and he's like, supervising your work today? Wherever you are, we want to meet you there. So please feel free to join us. Now, if you do come off mute at any point during today's session, you will show up on the live recording as well, or the recording as well as the live stream of today's chat and learn. So if you have any kind of privacy concerns, no stress, you just do not come off mute and you won't have an issue. Now, you can always participate by asking questions or adding comments. You can do that in the group chat. You can also, if you would prefer, you can DM any questions or comments you have to me, and that way I can raise them and keep you anonymous. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight is that you all have the power to drive today's conversation today. So if you took time out of your day to be here with us for the live, for the live stream, then we want to make sure that that time that you spent with Power to Fly and great companies like Helix is well worth it. So let us know what you want to know. We can't answer questions if we don't know that that's something that you're curious about. Now, like I said, today's session is being recorded. So what that means for you is that you get to kick back, relax, enjoy the chat that's coming up. You do not have to take notes. You do not have to worry if you missed, the second in the second resource that somebody was listing out. You don't have to worry about any of that. Now, everybody that registered is going to get an email from us about 1 to 2 business days, so probably early next week. And that email is going to have a link to where you can rewatch this session when it's posted on our website. Now, let's say that Andrea says something just mind-blowing, unbelievable. You cannot wait to share it with a coworker, a friend, a relative. You do not have to wait the 1 to 2 business days. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll grab the link for that here in just a moment and share it in the chat for y'all. But you can head over to our YouTube channel. The live stream is usually posted within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the stream. It'll be posted in our archive. But you can also, like I said, check out the rest of our videos on that channel as well. We have a huge selection of our archived videos there, as well as on our website. You can check out our entire library of recorded chats. They're free to access, and we just want to share these resources with as many people as we can. So if you want to, you are encouraged to take photos or video as we go, share it out on your social media, let your social network know that you are learning with Power to Fly. We would love to reshare or retweet any posts that y'all make, because we want to do everything we can to make sure that these free resources get to as many people as possible. All right. We want to be there for you at every stage of your career. So please, feel free to take advantage of these resources. Check us out on our social medias. We're at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, in addition to YouTube. We share blog posts. We share Meet the Recruiter videos. We share interview techniques and all kinds of great stuff. So please check those out. Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to today's speaker, but before I do, I want to highlight that Andrea is here on behalf of Helix today. Now, I'm going to share Helix's company page and that link with you in the chat thread as well, so bear with me here. But it's going to look, the link that I'm sharing is going to take you to the page that you're seeing in front of you. So let's throw that into the chat. There we go. Now, what you're going to do when you get to this page, you can see a lot of really cool stuff. You can search, past events that Helix has partnered on with us. You can check out more information about their benefits. There's also even more information as well as videos about like kind of inside the engineering team or inside the company culture. So absolutely take advantage of those. And of course, as always, you can search the open roles on their page as well. I'm looking at the live page right now. Currently, they've got 43 roles posted with us as opposed to the 38 that you see there. So absolutely check those out. See if Helix might be your next, your next great fit. If you are actively seeking and interested in Helix, but don't see anything that suits you or that like kind of matches your skill set or what you're looking for, the best thing you can do for yourself at the top right-hand corner of the Helix page is click follow. So that's going to put you on the company's follow network. It does a lot of really great things for you, but effectively it works like your friend at the company. It's going to tell Helix that you are interested in working for, or well, not for them, with them, even before you fill out an application. But it's also going to keep you updated when Helix posts new roles. So you don't have to worry about kind of coming back and scrolling and re-scrolling job boards that seemingly never change. And then all of a sudden there were a bunch of posts that you didn't see. So great, resources to avail yourself of. And you can follow and unfollow as many companies as you like on Powerfly. You can do it 100 times over, it doesn't matter. But obviously I recommend that you check out Helix. So from Helix, we are graced today by the amazing Andrea Clarkson. Now, Andrea has been working to revolutionize and optimize hiring processes for over 17 years. Now, throughout her career, Andrea has managed global recruitment teams and created hiring and retention strategies through consulting with multiple Fortune 100 companies and very many notable startup organizations as well. Now, in the past 6 years, Andrea has developed the specialization of helping hypergrowth startup orgs to achieve rapid and harmonious scale, focusing on North America, Latin America, and EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. But she also has the opportunity to branch out into APAC, the Asian and Pacific Island region. Rachel was my last guest. Andrea, super excited to have you today. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience before we dive in?
Well, that sounds really fancy on paper, but I want to let everyone know I'd like to have a very open and candid conversation today. I'm coming to you from Pacifica, California, so the Bay Area, 2 blocks from the Pacific Ocean over here. It's nice to meet you all.
Oh my gosh, my Midwest self is very, very jealous of your proximity to ocean water. So awesome, love that. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about before we go into the questions, these are some main takeaways from today's event. So the areas that you see on the screen, we've identified these both with via conversations with Andrea, as well as by taking a look at the questions that you all submitted when you registered today. But again, like I said, you all have the power to really drive this conversation. So if Andrea is talking about something and you want to go even deeper in depth on that, you want her to expand on it, let us know. If you submitted a question and you're not sure that we're going to have time to get to it, let us know. Ask the questions. I cannot make sure that we get answers if I don't know what y'all want to know. So some of the areas we're going to touch on, we're going to talk about what AQ is, or adaptability quotient, and how to identify your AQ level. We're going to discuss how that AQ level affects your career growth. And we're going to talk about some ways that you can sharpen those adaptability skills. So I'm going to stop my screen share here so that we can start diving into questions. Andrea, one of the first ones that we got a lot, honestly, was people wanting you to expand on this idea of adaptability and how we can identify our own personal level of AQ. What should people think of when they're considering adaptability as an idea?
Yeah, sure. So for the purpose of today's conversation, I want to focus on AQ based around the workplace. When you think about your workplace, it's really a growing organism. It's always growing, it's always changing, and you need to be able to do the same thing. You need to be able to grow and evolve. I actually have a few questions that you can think about when you're trying to identify your own AQ. So some things I like to ask myself is, do you embrace change in the workplace? Are you often the one on your team predicting and driving change? Are you comfortable working within newly developed frameworks or in scenarios where the framework is lacking? Are you often volunteering to take on new projects that will challenge you and make you flex new skills? And lastly, do you adjust well to change that you have no control over? And that's a really important one. And if you felt yourself sitting there being like, yes, I do all these things. So you probably already have a pretty strong foundation AQ. If you were listening to these questions and you felt yourself saying, that's scary, that's okay. It probably means you need to strengthen your AQ skills. And we'll dive into some ways, how you can do that. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really good place to start. I like this. Okay, so let's talk about some of the key adaptability skills. What really goes into building up your adaptability. What goes into that?
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of things. I would say handling change well, creative problem solving, and driving innovation. Having high curiosity is always high on the list when you read about AQ. Being a lifelong learner, and embracing that there will always be unknowns. And I think that one, honestly, is the hardest for many of us, or maybe all of us at certain times. But I think that is definitely one of the top AQ skills.
Okay, cool. And just as a highlight here, I do see we've got a lot of people asking questions in the chat. If you've got questions, that's awesome. Please keep sending them in. I'm going to gather as many as I can, at which point we're going to see how many we can get to. So if you've got questions, ask early, ask often. I do see a lot of them coming in, but do not worry. We will make sure we get to as many as possible. Okay, so let's talk about some of the ways that we could foster or improve our own AQ level. What does it look like when people start trying to assess this in themselves? Are we usually accurate? Are there tools that we should use? What does that look like when we are trying to improve? How do you know where to improve if you don't know where you are?
Yeah, I think, going back to the questions we highlighted, it's good to start there. And then it's really good to think through a different set of questions. To me, a lot of adapting to change is shifting your mindset. So what can I learn from this change? How does this change benefit me? What problems am I trying to solve with this change? What can I best do to prepare for this change? I have a really small, simple example that kind of puts myself out there a bit. So when I moved from Florida to California to start a new job, you would think that I would be concerned about the move and not knowing anyone in the new area. Oddly enough, I was always a PC girl, and I was moving into a Mac environment at work. And it sounds really silly, but for me, I'm very fast. I'm a shortcut person. I really knew my PCs. I had this fear of not being able to perform my top level because I wasn't going to have those shortcuts. And to me, that was earth shattering. I was nervous. So instead of going out there and setting myself up for failure, I did the simplest thing to help myself adapt to this change. I went online. I found a forum with all the shortcuts. I printed them out. I had my crutch right next to me on my desk. And the first week, it really helped me in two areas. It minimized me asking coworkers for something very basic when they were very busy, right? Like I had it. It minimized my own disruption, and then it enabled me to move forward more quickly. And more importantly, it made me more adaptable and more comfortable. I know that's one small example, but this is an example of how you can take something that you're fearful of, you can take a step away from it, you can find a solution that works for you and that minimizes disruption.
Okay, great. All right, so if we're looking at ways to really kind of train those adaptability skills, when I was thinking of this question, I was very reminded of come from my very Catholic upbringing. No offense to anybody who still is in church, but it was a lot of things like, if you want to be more patient, you don't ask God for patience. God sends you, situations that will help you develop patience. It's not like an active like handing out thing. So if you're trying to train your adaptability skills, do you see people training them in the right kind of way, or do you see them maybe putting the cart before the horse a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people put the cart before the horse, and to me that is fear, right? I think a lot of what holds us back from being adaptable is the fear of the unknown, the fear of not being good enough, not being strong enough, or the fact that we don't understand how this is going to benefit us, if I'm going to be honest. We're all, I'm sure, lovely people on this call, but we're also all inherently a little selfish when it comes to things. So when you are given a change and you don't really understand why this change was given to you or how it impacts business outcomes, you might be reluctant to face that change. So something I also often do is take a step back and really, really look at how this change is going to benefit me, how it's going to benefit my team, the organization, really, really understand the outcome that I'm looking for. And for me, at least, when I can understand that outcome, I'm much more willing to be able to adapt to the change that's coming my way because I know it will ultimately benefit me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I feel like that change, one of the things that you said in your intro that really resonated with me was this idea of like, if you're not good with change, and that describes a lot of people I know, but you can be a person that's adaptable without enjoying the change happening, right? Like these are not synonymous things. All right. So let's take a look at some of the other questions people have been sending in. A lot of people wanted to know what to do in situations where you are working with a coworker or a colleague who is great to work with, but there's a very low AQ there. And so it makes it a challenge to work with that person when there are changes to the project or there are nuanced situations. Now, I don't think this is a unique experience, right? I think a lot of people have been through this, but what would you recommend doing if you are, kind of stuck working with someone who is very inflexible?
Yeah, well, first, I'm going to say this is a hard one. It's hard. To your point, Meg, we've all been there. And this is kind of why I'm doubling down on why strengthening your AQ is really important, not just for yourself and your own progression. It's important for your relationship with your peers. It's important when you're reporting up. So I think there are a couple of things that you can do here that are fairly basic. And I won't say that they will solve it every time, but I think these are good foundational things to do. You want to consistently model the behavior you want to see. And I think that's something we say a lot when we're looking to help others, kind of correct or mirror different behaviors. But I think for me, that's somewhere I would start. You also want to be able to, share the whys that we talked about earlier in a positive way. So think about some frameworks that would help this individual connect why this is going to, once again, benefit them. Why is this important? Saying, I know this may be difficult for you right now, but this is going to make things so much easier in the future, and giving a little context. Once again, when people understand the whys, they're much less resistant to push forward and change. And something that takes time. So this isn't going to happen overnight, but really creating an open, honest relationship with those individuals, where hopefully you can eventually find time to give them some direct feedback about how their resistance to change is really holding back the project or holding back the partnership. Once again, I know that can be nuanced. So there are times maybe where you need to go to a peer and get some advice on how to strengthen that relationship, or maybe it's your boss or your mentor that can help you some insight there. But I do always believe that many times that we're exhibiting these things or we're working with someone who has low AQ, we're just not aware, right? I don't think anybody on this call, or really anybody ever, is sitting around thinking, well, I just don't want to be adaptable today. I want to be resistant to change. I don't think that's the case. I think once again, it goes back to those deeper rooted fears or lack of understanding of what you're driving towards that keeps people back from driving that change.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, right? There's a lot of people that are not necessarily resistant to change. It's the stuff and the emotions and all the crap that goes along with it, or that might have gone along with it, historically speaking, as far as their lived experience. And so, you might have somebody that does not have a problem with what like the actual change is. It's the mechanism of, right? So do you think that it's possible to kind of solve these things as they come up in the moment? Or do you think that it's better if you run into a situation with somebody with a very low AQ, do you think it's better to handle it in the moment, or to kind of wait and step back and try and like reassess after the situation has happened?
I think that goes back to the relationship, right? If there's already a strong foundational relationship there, I mean, the best thing is always to address things as they come, right? But if there's not a strong relationship, there, that's going to come off as a conflict or make somebody uncomfortable. And that's not what you want to do, right? You want to help yourself. You want to help this individual. You want a partner to move together, move forward together. So I would say, if there's a good relationship, you could start there and have the immediate conversation. In most scenarios, it's probably something that you yourself need to take a step back. Always hold yourself accountable before assuming someone else has low AQ. Are you providing, the information that is needed? Did you already kind of give some of the whys? Is it clear, what's expected out of this project or this relationship? So I would ask yourself those things first. And if you feel like you have already built a good foundation with giving that individual the information, then I would take a step back and start thinking about, okay, how can I then work with them to help drive this project along? How can I make them more comfortable so that they're more fluid and more adaptable in this situation?
Ooh, I like that. I love that idea. Because you're right. I mean, like people being, uncertain or something, like you want to be able to be kind of reassure someone that, like, even if this change doesn't work, like, okay, we'll try something else. Or, this is, if this doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. Which can be, I mean, I struggle with that as well. So I don't think it's something that any of us are immune to. All right, let's, we had a question from the chat here. Crisel Rodriguez had said, had asked, are there any online assessments on AQ that you would recommend?
There are several. I don't know if there's one I would say I would fully recommend. I think there's a lot more literature out there than people realize. I think everyone thinks about, do I have high IQ? Do I have high EQ? Not a lot of people spend a lot of time looking up, hey, how do I become more adaptable? How does adaptability quotient fit into my professional life or even my personal life? So there's a lot of content out there. Off the top of my head, I'll be honest, I don't know if there's a favorite one I have or like a true assessment outside of the questions that I highlighted that I think you would go to. But if you like, after this call, I can do a little research and see if there is one I like, and I'm happy to share that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, pardon me, I'll flag it later, but if you send those resources back in the email chain we've got going, then we can make sure that those get linked when we send out the rewatch emails. So yeah, absolutely, we can make sure that we've got stuff for people to go check out. So you talked a little bit about how AQ can impact like other areas of our lives. Let's talk about what impact or what effect it has on career growth.
Yeah, it definitely has an impact on your career growth. And, I'll give another, kind of personal story where adaptability really helped me and my career growth. And that's actually kind of my journey at Helix. Before joining Helix, my background was more software, hardware, artificial intelligence. It was not in the biotech scientific space. I had about 9 months in health tech. So initially coming into my role, I was going to focus less on the lab and more on our full-time scale. And then I think because of the pandemic, about 4 days into my job, it was like, hey, Andrea, we're going through this massive scale on the lab. Can you lean in here? And so there are obviously a lot of unknowns there, right? So once again, I could have let my fear take over and could have said, I'm not an expert on building these type of scientific labs from the ground up. And I could have pulled back and I could have been resistant to helping. Instead, I leaned in. The reason I was able to lean in and what's enabled me to grow in my career is that I was confident in my strengths. In order to have good adaptability, I think you have to be really strong and firm in your convictions about your own strengths. So my strengths in the scenario were understanding growing organizations, understanding hypergrowth, understanding urgent and immediate needs. And that's really what it was going to take to lift this project off. So I own those things. And I said, yes, I'm happy to help. I'm really good here. But if I'm going to lean into this, I need you to inform me on the scientific depth that I lack. So I was very clear on what I could do. I was very clear in my gaps and what I would need from my partner in order to help them. And by us working together and me being very clear in my expectations early on, I was able to adapt, and we were extremely successful in that scenario.
Oh, I like that. Okay. And I want to ask, for people here as well, please, if you have experience with this, or if you think that, either that lack of AQ has impacted your career path, let us know. How have you handled that in the past? Personally, I graduated from college into like the worst job market ever. I graduated in 2008. And so like kind of my entire career, like work history for the last 20 years has been kind of any port in a storm has sort of been the theme there. Do you think that it's ever possible to be overly adaptable or too adaptable?
Yeah, I saw that question actually come up a lot in the chat and online. So I don't think so. And I'm going to frame this in a certain way. So being adaptable and setting boundaries are two very different things. And you need to be aware of that. So being adaptable is understanding like, hey, this change is happening. This change is necessary. This is something that's going on. I'm going to make myself flexible in order to be a very strong partner here. Now, if you do that with lack of or poor boundaries, that can become an issue. So if you're just constantly saying yes to things where you don't add any depth, or because you're afraid to say no, that's very different than being adaptable. And I think people often confuse the two, because people will say, well, I want to have boundaries. And I'll say, great, we all want to have boundaries. You need to be sure on what those are. How does this event, or how does this project, how does flexing here, is that really against your boundaries? Or is this more something that you're reluctant to change, or you're fearful of change and you're not going to be successful here? So hopefully that distinction is helpful.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So when it comes to things like the interview process, we want to be able to display a lot of our skills, right? And then, I feel like people kind of are starting to think about this, not just in terms of hard skills, but also soft skills. Do you think that there's a way to present AQ skills in an interview process?
Yeah, I definitely think that there are. I think you want to often in interviews, you want to be able to share, situational examples. So in this scenario, if you want to flex your AQ, you want to share examples of situations where you needed to be adaptable and then you had successful outcomes. You also want to speak to your stretch goals and how you challenge yourself professionally. People really care about that. Once again, going back to, are you a constant learner? Are you willing to go outside of your comfort zone? Are you willing to try new things and learn new things? So that's really important to highlight. And I know I did share, that you should share successful outcomes, because I believe you do, but I think it's really good to balance that. So you want to be able to also share stories where potentially you initially failed and how you use that as a learning opportunity. Hiring managers are really going to think about those things. They're going to listen to those wins. They're going to listen to those losses, but more importantly, they're going to look at how you navigated through unknown, uncharted territory.
Ooh, yes, I like this a lot. You're right. It's it just highlights the importance of storytelling, right? When it comes to that interview process, because you're not just trying to, show a bullet point list of like, these are all the things I'm good at. These are all the things I can do. It's also very, very important to be able to do it in a way that is going to connect with that interviewer. Do you have any advice for if you find yourself in a situation like with an interviewer and they just don't think this is a good thing, like, you know what I mean? Like when you can kind of get that vibe that people are like, okay, that's a nice thing, but like, let's talk about something else. Is that, do you think that that's common for people to see when it comes to interviews?
So just to clarify, so the interviewer is maybe losing interest or
either maybe doesn't prioritize, something like adaptability, or doesn't maybe necessarily see the value in it.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope, I guess I would say, I hope hiring managers are prioritizing adaptability. But I think, to the questions that I highlighted before, I don't think you're throwing, like you're saying, not saying I'm adaptable, you're not like canning it. I think any interviewer really likes to hear scenario based answers during the interview process, right? To your point, the storytelling is always powerful. Now, if you're sitting there and you have just shared what you felt is a compelling story that highlights your adaptability and your tech depth or whatever it is, and the person is really not giving you the energy that you were looking for, I think just like anything, any relationship, you want to qualify, hey, is there anything else you would like me to add here? Or were you looking for something different here. I think that's something often people are fearful of asking in an interview in general, but it's okay to qualify. It's okay to define if you went down the right path, and whether it's AQ or something else that you're trying to drive to. Owning that in the moment is the most important thing that you can do in an interview, so that you didn't give them an answer that they just didn't want to hear. If you actually heard something and answered something else, that happens to all of us. Maybe I'm doing it right now, who knows? But it's always good to ask your audience or the hiring manager if you indeed did go down the wrong path there.
Yeah, okay. Now we had a lot of people that had questions regarding, change in the workplace, and obviously there's always going to be change, but in the last 2 years, especially, we have seen a lot, not just change in your work life, but change in people's home lives, all kinds of stuff. Do you think that there are any ways that people with high AQ can leverage that skill to help other people in the workplace that are having that difficulty adjusting?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think once again, if you're very strong in this area, you're probably pretty in tune to other people's, emotions. You're probably good at driving relationships. So I think the place that you want to start is understanding, what is holding this individual or this team back. Is it fear? If it's fear, work with, those individuals on getting past that. Once tell them the outcomes, they'll be positive, what they're going to gain from it. Is it lack of knowledge of why are we doing this thing? Sometimes all of us are like, why am I doing this thing? Or why do we have to do this new thing? Let's be honest. So maybe your peers don't really understand. They don't have as much insight as you do into business outcomes or project outcomes that are going to be driven from this project or this process. So I think starting with understanding what is holding this individual or this team back, and then kind of taking a step back and then thinking through, okay, well, how can I foster more positive energy around this? Or can I be an owner of this? Do I want to step up myself because I'm strong here and be a project leader to help navigate this team through this process?
Okay, so to touch on something you said there, if you're trying to foster that culture of AQ at work, or if you're trying to foster that development, encourage that development in your teammates, are there any ways that that team members can do this? Should it be from a manager perspective? What do you think is possible in that area?
Oh, I think it's everybody. I think managers should. And when we talk about career growth and development, I think that's why I say AQ is very important. Hopefully, your managers already have high IQ and it's coming from them. But that being said, once again, if it's something that you're exceptionally strong in, you do want to mirror those behaviors. You do want to identify where fear of moving forward is holding people or projects back. Sometimes it's easier to not necessarily call someone out individually or individually say, hey, it's you're holding us back. That can be really uncomfortable. But maybe if it's a project based, you can take a step back from the project and understand what exactly is the bottleneck, because that's a part of having high AQ is understanding bottlenecks. Okay, what can we do to alleviate the bottleneck for this project, for this team? And then when you give solutions, when you're proactive about providing your team members with solutions to hesitations, to bottlenecks, whatever it is, they're much more willing to move forward and partner with you.
Very good. Okay. This is kind of leading me into a question that we got in the chat. I want to see if we can touch on it a little bit here. Sherry Lynn had asked a question regarding neurodiverse individuals in the workforce. Their question specifically dealt with ADHD, but I also, I come from a lovely, double dragon background of ADHD mixed with bipolar. So the idea of change in the workplace already kind of makes me like, oh God, but why? I barely figured out how to do it the first way. Like it makes me immediately afraid, but like, I know that change is good. So if you've got other people in the workplace who also have, who are neurodivergent, do you think that changes the way that you either try to foster that AQ development with them, or change and foster the environment around them to support that?
Yeah, I think so. To a degree, right? You always want to be able to help individuals based on their strengths. So if we're going to own it, I always joke I'm ADHD to the 10th power myself, and I consider myself to have fairly strong AQ, though I'm always working on it. Some things that I do, because that is a limitation and a superpower, all mixed into one. I make sure that I am extremely organized. I create a lot of shortcuts for myself right away, and I have them ready to go. I create a lot of templates and I have them ready to go. Those type of things. I kind of set myself up for success on the front end, so I'm not scrambling all over throughout the process. But obviously that's just one type of neurodiversity. I think, understanding once again with your peers, what their limitations are, what's holding them back, or why haven't they been successful? I think that's the root of everything, right? Especially those of us who are in the office with neurodiversity, understanding why we're fearful and understanding why we're hesitating really helps us to identify what tools we need to be successful in the workplace. And then maybe it's you, maybe you're the partner to help get those tools to that individual. Maybe it's something you need to work with, the broader team on, or your manager, and say, hey, Sandra's amazing, but she is lacking support here. Is this something that we have that I'm unaware of, or is this something we can build out? I think, if you do understand where it comes from in the first place, and what they need to be more comfortable to move forward, you can definitely empower your partners to have stronger AQ.
Oh, yes. Loving that idea. You're right. Like, kind of not only making, setting up everybody around you for success, but also like kind of keeping in mind, like, okay, where are these kind of stumbling blocks happening? What is the common thread there? What support can be provided? All that kind of good stuff. And just keep reminding you all, we have a little under 20 minutes left. So if you've got questions, please feel free to send them in. We'll try and get to as many as we can today. All right. So if you are in the role of a manager, do you think it's possible to measure adaptability in an interview? We talked about, how you can display it if you're an applicant, but what do you think managers should be looking for? Or do you think it's possible to assess this in an interview?
Yeah, I think it's possible. And I actually believe it's something that we should all be doing. And I'm pretty passionate about that. There's a lot of literature online. And then once again, I can send out some links after this chat if that's helpful for everyone here. I did put down a couple of my, favorite questions that I like to ask, but there are just so many depending on what you're looking for. Those are generally behavioral based, situational based questions. So one of my favorites is, please describe your approach to adopting a new process or software product. Obviously, you tailor that towards the role. Tell us the situation in which you had to adjust changes over which you had no control. How did you handle that? I think understanding how people handle things specifically where they have no control is extremely important. Are you comfortable working in a fast-paced, progressive environment? What do you do when your work priorities change quickly? So asking those type of questions, and then listening for what you want to listen for is specific examples, right? And this pairs with you as if you're interviewing, right? You want to give very specific stories. You want to talk about, how you actually, work through this, how you adjusted to that change, how you handled that situation, what was your approach there? And if you're listening to those things and the hiring manager, and it seems like this person was very fluid and collaborative, and they were learning things as they were going throughout the process, or they're even highlighting things that they learned from a process where maybe the road got a little bumpy, that signals that somebody either has high AQ or is on the path towards having high AQ.
I like that distinction of like, if someone has it or if they're on the path, because I feel like that's something that is, I feel like a lot of people feel like this. I certainly do, where it's like, well, if I'm not there yet, like, I don't really get to claim it, right? Like, I can't be like, well, I'm working on it, because, I'm not there yet. But I think it's very important to highlight that, like, kind of everybody's on that path, right? There's not really a level you get where you're like, okay, I'm done. I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, very much so. To own it, we are all on that path. Whether you feel like you're on the stronger side or something that's a new skill and you've never thought about, this is something I'm passionate about, but this is something I am constantly flexing and challenging myself to ensure that I'm continuing to grow and learn so that I can grow in my professional career.
Yeah. Okay. Now, all right. One of the things I want to talk about here is adaptability and boundaries, right? So one of the things that has been a very, very large conversation, at least in the chats that I've been hosting for the last couple months, are things like setting setting boundaries between your work life and your work-life balance, work-life integration, but also recognizing like, where are the boundaries for you of like, how much are you giving at work? Like personally, I throw a lot of myself into work, and that is great sometimes. It is also really, really bad for me sometimes. So if you are a person that is trying to set or maintain boundaries when it comes to work, and the adaptability or the changes that you're being asked to make are impacting those boundaries, how do you recommend people kind of balance that? Is obviously it's a case by case basis, but do you think it is possible to both be adaptable and have certain boundaries that are like, this is what I need to be successful in this role, or this is a bridge too far for me?
Yeah, I would say very much so. I see myself actually kind of firmly rooted on both sides of those as having fairly strong AQ. Once again, I'm still flexing that skill, but somebody who has pretty clear boundaries. I can maybe give an example of how, I separate the two, if that's helpful in this scenario. For me, adaptability is about being able to take on change, embrace change, really understand and predict business outcomes, really continue to do things that push you outside of your comfort zone. Now, that doesn't mean you need to work 90 hours a week to do that, right? So there's me over here learning, growing, being fluid, giving myself the time and bandwidth to get up to speed on things. But over here, in terms of the boundaries side, I'm very, clear with people like, hey, these are my general working hours. If you see in between these hours, if there's something available, you can book with me. Outside of these hours, I'm a single mom. I have full custody of my two small girls. People know that about me. I'm very clear about that within my relationship with individuals as I get to know them. So I don't allow being adaptable to get in the way of the boundaries that I set with my working hours, my working relationships, projects. Understanding bandwidth is very different than being adaptable. So if you think just taking everything on makes you adaptable, that's not what we're driving at today. We're driving at being comfortable within change. But within that change, if you actually do understand strong business outcomes, you should also understand your own bandwidth. So even though I'm adaptable, if I'm at a point where I'm exceeding bandwidth, or if a project doesn't make sense this quarter, or my team doesn't have the bandwidth, I'm fully comfortable owning those boundaries. And I don't think that's seen as non-adaptable or non-flexible. It's just making a business case for why something isn't feasible.
Thank you. Thank you for that distinction. I think that is a really, really great point to make. You're not picking a hill to die on because you just really don't want to change email servers. Like, you are trying to nail down like why this is not great from a professional standpoint, and remove it from yourself and make it more about the situation. I think that's wonderful. I like that. There are a lot of people commenting in the chat that they either had not really heard about AQ before this, or had not really got a chance to dive in as deep. Are there any things, resources, books, podcasts, like blogs, anything that you recommend for people that want to do more research and learn more about AQ?
Yeah, I'll send quite a bit of those out after the call. I think it's interesting because, and I know we talked about this before, and I saw it bubble up in the chat again. I've heard of, the IQ quotient. I've, heard of emotional quotient, then became really big. I mean, you'll see a lot out there. I think around 2016 is when you started hearing a lot about AQ. And then you will be surprised, even if you do your quick Google search, about how many articles there are out there in Harvard Business Review and Forbes that actually talk about adaptability being the core to being successful in the office, being successful as an individual. It's something that actually, I'm just now starting to bring, more into Helix, where I am, into our interviewing process and educating people. And I got the same thing. It was like, that's really cool. I've just never heard about it. Right. And hopefully that's why we're all here today, to kind of understand, well, how does my adaptability fit into my emotional intelligence and my raw intelligence? And how do we differentiate those? Because there's actually a lot of crossover between the three. But I would say really, particularly in my experience helping organizations to go through and iterate, large scale change, when I look at the people that I've helped to bring into the organization, or my teams helped to bring in the organization, that stay with the company, that are successful, the people that are happy, I'll be honest, the people that I look at work that are happy, they're feeling good, they have high AQ. So I want everyone here not only to think about their adaptability in terms of what am I giving to work, because it's not about all what you're giving to work or even what you're getting from, that actual project. It's really about your happiness as well. So I wanted to highlight that there.
No, I think that's a very good call out. As I was listening to you, I was kind of wondering, do you think the relationship between specifically AQ and EQ, so that adaptability and emotional intelligence, like, do you think that the relationship there is a bit like chicken and egg? Because it kind of seems to me that if you're going to have good AQ, it does require a certain amount of emotional intelligence about yourself and potentially others. So do you think that they are like so like intrinsically connected? Do you think it's possible to develop one without the other?
I do. I mean, I think they're very, very, very connected. I guess, taking a step back to say, could you maybe develop one without the other? I would say, I mean, you could to a degree, right? You could have strong general emotional intelligence with, how you're, projecting yourself to others, how you're relating to others, how you're giving feedback to others. So maybe you're very aware of that, but maybe on the other side, you yourself are just fearful of certain things or reluctant to change or slow to change or not creating frameworks of success for yourself. A lot of AQ is finding a framework that works for you to be able to adapt and then creating that and duplicating that over and over again. So I do think, there's a chicken and egg thing going on there, because the more emotionally intelligent you are, I think the more self-aware that you stated you would be and the more adaptable henceforth you would be. But to be honest, I do think you could be emotionally intelligent and still lacking some AQ skills.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as I'm thinking that over in my mind, I'm thinking of several specific coworkers from past jobs where I'm like, you're very, very smart and very inflexible. This is difficult. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody has met people like that or worked with people like that at some point or other. One of the things that I'm kind of is like replaying in the back of my mind here as you're talking is the idea that necessity is the mother of invention. And when you're talking about being adaptable, do you think that there's a relationship there between adaptability and resourcefulness? Do you think that is a skill that is absolutely necessary to be an adaptable person?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's even more chicken and egg to your point earlier to me. So yeah, very much so. When I think about being resourcefulness, really, you're finding creative ways in which to adapt to change, right? And I really think that in and of itself is the heart of having strong AQ, is that you're looking at driving creative solutions to be more flexible, to move forward, to be more fluid in the situation. So yeah, if you consider yourself resourceful, I would say you already are pretty high up there on having strong AQ.
Very, very cool. All right. We have about 10 minutes left. And so I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time to talk about Helix and kind of discuss some information that we asked you about there. I want to talk a little bit in larger, kind of pull back and have like a larger viewpoint on this. Things, at least for me, this idea of like analysis paralysis and imposter syndrome. This is, I mean, I know I'm not the only one, but this is some bullshit I feel like I deal with every day. Do you have any advice on how to kind of overcome some of these things that can be very, very crippling for people by utilizing the AQ skills that we want to be trying to develop?
Yeah. Dreaded imposter syndrome. I'm with you. We all have it. We all hate it. Being fully transparent, I had a dream the other night that no one showed up to this chat, even though I really wanted to be here. I really wanted to talk about this. So that's like classic imposter syndrome. Even
I'm sorry, are you like, you must be reading my dream journal because I have that thought constantly.
Yeah, even in my sleep, I'm doubting myself with something I feel like I really know a decent amount about. So just want to be candid there. Imposter syndrome gets the best of us. So to your question, like, how do we move past this? Now, obviously, this is very nuanced, but for AQ specific, something I do or something I did to show up here today and connect with all of you, you want to silence those voices. And to me, that boils down to understanding that the benefits of what you're going to do outweigh your fears. So me being here and hopefully giving benefit to all of you, and also me benefiting from this experience, that's much stronger than my fear of no one showing up to this call. And I know that's a very simple thing, but I think it's a great psychological thing to do. It's a trick, if you will, to really help you get past imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it is vastly important for me, at least, to remember that no matter how like established people are or how like great they might be at their jobs, no one has ever done today before, ever. And they're never going to do it again. So if anybody's going to tell you like, oh yeah, I got this, I know exactly. No, you don't. You don't know what's coming. Nobody knows what's coming. It's always different. There's always something going on. So I love this idea of not just developing a skill that is very useful in your work life, but also something that has ripple effects outwards in your life as well. Now, obviously, AQ is something that you are very, very passionate about. Do you think there was ever a time in your life where you maybe either didn't have this or it was not, developed to the level it is now? Like, were there things that you noticed happening, even in hindsight, that you now see like, oh yeah, that could have gone a lot better if I had known more about this earlier?
Yeah, for sure. And I know earlier we spoke about, neurodiversity. And for me, a lot of it, I think in school, and then earlier in my career, was, not, creating the frameworks that work for me to be more adaptable. Once again, I know having a strong understanding what your limitations are is critical. So once I got a better grasp as I grew, and understanding what my limitations were, I would go into an environment and I would set myself up for success every time. Once again, going back to, for me, it's like a lot of like building out templates and frameworks on the front end that then I have all these shortcuts and things. So when I'm creative, when I'm passionate, I can just run with it, right? The foundation, the hard work is done on the front, and then I can get into my passion zone. So for me, that was something I had to teach myself. So yeah, I think most of it, I don't think anyone honestly is born wholly adaptable, especially when we're talking about it in terms of in a professional environment. I think we have to really take a step back and think about, where and what is, being held back, where we are not succeeding, and then set ourselves up for success through AQ.
Okay. So if we are thinking about, let's go real big picture. If we're thinking about humanity in terms of how visual and how how influenceable we are, what do you think the impact is on an org or even just on a team if you have a manager who is incredibly either like pick an extreme, either very, very great at AQ or very bad at it themselves? Have you seen this at all in your experience or people that you've worked with?
Yeah. If, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but yeah, if you have a leader or mentor that has very low AQ, that can have just a significant negative impact on your organization, because if that individual is not willing to adapt or see the whys or understand the whys or really connect into the bigger picture, how can they then come and translate that to you? How can they then motivate you to do your work and to move forward? How can they mentor you when they themselves are reluctant to change? So I think on that side, I have unfortunately seen that, and it makes it really difficult when you're reporting up into someone like that. It makes it difficult for your team members to really get the information that they need to be successful. On the other side, I've worked with managers that are just always learning. They're innovative. They're not always only adaptable to change. They're often driving needed change, not just changing things because, right, there are frameworks that need to exist. When I've worked for individuals like that personally, I felt motivated. I felt bought in. I felt aware of not just what projects, I felt aware of the big picture, because if you're a leader and you have high AQ, you are very strong at giving the big picture whys to everybody. And when we feel like we are brought into the behind the scenes, we're much more engaged and likely to perform well.
That is so incredibly true. I feel like it should have like neon lights flashing around it, right? Like people will go out on a limb, or people will, suspend judgment or disbelief on something if they have an understanding that like there's not like a behind the scenes thing going on that you don't have access to, right? Being able to share like here's how this is all working engenders that trust that would be, it is absolutely crucial to being able to develop this AQ, right? You have to have that trust between team members or between management that the changes that are happening are for the best or for everyone. And that can be, something that may or may not be communicated very well depending on your org. So yeah. Okay, in the last 5 minutes we have, the time always goes incredibly quickly, but in the last 5 minutes, I want to, kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about Helix. So the questions that you're seeing on the screen, these are questions that we put to Andrea prior to today's session. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was how you describe the culture at Helix. Can you expand on why you think supportive is like the best word to describe Helix's company culture?
Yeah, I lightly mentioned earlier, I'm a single mom. I'm a full-time mom. I have full custody of two small girls. I had a big challenge ahead of me at Helix, but I was very clear early on that like, hey, I need some flexibility in that. We're in the middle of a pandemic. My kids are home with me. You might see them on occasion. And I could not have asked for more supportive coworkers who empowered me not only to do my job and trust me to do my job, but empowered me to be myself, which is a mom who is probably at her bandwidth in her personal life during that time during the pandemic.
Okay. Now, your favorite part about working at Helix, I absolutely love this. And I not to like cast aspersions on anybody else, but a lot of what we hear from people is that their favorite part about their job is the people. And it's not to say that that's not true. I feel like that is true for a lot of people, but I'm really interested in your answer here. So you had said that you get to be a core part of making DNA insights accessible and actionable for everyone while being allowed to be your authentic self. Can you tell us what that is like for you? Like what changes for you on the daily that makes this stand out for you at Helix as opposed to other places where you've worked?
Yeah. So in terms of, making DNA and insights accessible and actionable for everyone, I am somebody who has invisible diseases myself. So if I were to be able to integrate and have more knowledge about my own DNA makeup and work with my doctor on that, these things would have helped me significantly throughout my life and even now. So on a personal level, the work that we're doing at Helix is really important to me. And then going back to the authentic self piece, that's, where I said like, hey, I'm a single mom. I'm a busy person. I'm out in a state where I moved out here by myself. I don't have immediate family around. So being able to just be transparent and be comfortable within who I am and not hide those pieces of myself at work is just my favorite thing about being at Helix.
I swear, I mean, I know we have a lot of questions or we have a lot of chats on Power to Fly around these subjects, but every time I get to hear somebody say, I don't have to censor the parts of myself I bring to work, it's like my heart both lights up and breaks, right? Like you don't to ever have to waste energy on not sharing a part of themselves with people, right? Especially when it's something that's intrinsic to you that you don't want to hide. And so like I hate that this is something that like has been very common, but it makes me so happy to hear every time somebody's like, I don't have to do that. I don't have to waste that energy there. I don't have to expend the time. I can spend that energy on things that really matter to me. So y'all, I'm gonna cry today. This has been a very emotional day, so bear with me on this. All right, let's talk about your interview tips. Are these Helix specific, or are these your top tips? Regardless of venue.
I would just say these are my regardless. These are some of my top interview tips for individuals.
I like it. When you're talking about utilize that recruiter to empower you, what do you mean there? Is this like ask questions of your recruiter? Is, what should people take away from that?
Yeah. So your recruiter should be your resource, right? If you're working with the right recruiter, they should be able to help you to prepare, help you to understand what is happening. Once again, kind of going back to AQ, right? You're going to know what's coming, so you can actually prepare yourself and be more comfortable with that change. So I think it's really important. And many people, I realize, don't lean on their recruiter to actually drive these conversations or to help prepare them.
Well, and I think depending on how long you've been at your job search or what industry you're in, it's very easy to feel like you are lucky to get time with a recruiter, right? And so I feel like a lot of people handle that situation in terms of, what can I do? Like, I need to make the absolute most of this, and it is, something that you need to be prepared, right? Like that if you ask for things, somehow it's like that you're not prepared for it, which is obviously could not be further from the truth. All right, let's talk about what you're optimizing in your career. Could you share an example of that? Something that you that can help people try and identify ways they're optimizing in their own careers?
Yeah. So I think it's really important going into an interview to know what you want to get coming out of the interview, right? So the question you want to ask yourself is, what do I want my next career or the next step in my career to look like, right? So that's essentially what you're optimizing for, what you're driving towards. What does happiness and progress and growth look like for you? If you understand all those things and have boundaries around that on the front end, you're going to be able to connect with a company who is offering you that growth, who's going to offer you the environment where you want to be. And I think a lot of people don't create enough space for themselves in the interview process to actually think about, what do I want out of this process? And then at the end, they're waffling like, oh, this sounds neat, but I don't know, because you didn't really go in with an expectation of what you wanted to have when you exited the process.
Ooh, that's good. I like this. Y'all, this is going to be one of the ones I get to send back out to people in like heavy rotation of like, oh yeah, you got to hear what Andrea said about this. So thank you. And I know we're a minute over. Apologies. I try to stick very close to the schedule to respect everybody's time. But Andrea, it's been wonderful to spend the last hour with you. Huge thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, your expertise. This has been really lovely. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you too. And thank you for everybody. It was really nice to virtually meet you all.
Yes. All right. Thank you to our audience members. Y'all were, turning up in the chat there. I was loving seeing people's comments and questions. Thank you so, so much for that. I hope that you, if this has been your first Power to Fly event and you have just now met us, welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. If you are one of our frequent flyers, we are so, so happy to see you. And we can't wait to see all of you, new or returning guests, to join us on many more events in the future. So that's going to round us out for Thursday, but we'll be back tomorrow with more great programming. And I hope everybody has a safe, happy, and healthy, Thursday and the rest of your weekend. Enjoy, and we'll see you later, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Meg. Bye.
Mama told me I should marry me a rich man. Maybe have a couple kids while you still can. Just a white early nights, a minivan. But guess what? I'm alright, not the plan. They call me